I had seen my mother go through it. My dad actually fell off a 6-foot step ladder just before my 12th birthday and broke his neck. I found him. And, I have a child with learning disabilities. So for me, caregiving and, I don't know, helping people has always been my forte. So um, I, I had started a parent support group for kids with learning disabilities. My child isn't severe as some people's are, you know, but I had started this care group, and my opening thing to all these parents was, you know what? This baby that you held in your arms and you had all these hopes and dreams for, you don't have to give up those hopes and dreams. You just have to change them a little bit. Um, you have these moments in life that are defining both for you as an individual and as a couple and even as a family. And an aortic dissection will do that. It is a defining moment. Each one of us, I guess, completes that moment in their own way. For me, it was a lot of learning, a huge learning curve. I had no idea it was up and coming. Tom had been told he had some high blood pressure issues, and for him, he felt it was situational and would go away, and it didn't. Hi, my name is Erin Cavanaugh, and I am the caregiver of a survivor.
We met in the early 90s. We got married in the late 90s, and he had his aortic dissection in 2012. I was working for the state. I was working for New York State doing unemployment claims. And so that was my job for a good long while. As a matter of fact, I had started my job on December the 6th, and he had his dissection on December 23rd. He was working in a nonprofit kitchen feeding homeless people and, people that were down on their luck. So he had just gotten in a bunch of food for the holidays, December 23rd. So they had moved an extremely heavy load of food into the walk-ins and all of that in preparation for the holiday meals. So it was a lot of confusing time and, just settling into a brand new job and, all that entails that, having a child who was 12, about 13 years of age, 14, 15 years of age. So all the teenage angst, new job, and a husband that's laying at death's door in the hospital. Right away, he took on the responsibility of going to the hospital. And so he woke up, he must have woken up before me. He has always had sleep issues, so I've learned to sleep through him getting up during the night. Otherwise, I would never sleep. So he must have gotten up at some point 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, but he called for me at 6:30 from the kitchen where he was totally dressed and leaning on the kitchen counter over the sink and said, I have to go to the hospital. And I said, I'll take you. He said, no. He said, I've already called the ambulance. They're coming for me. He said, I have given you every tool in my toolbox. I know you'll be okay. He said, I do not want you to take me to the hospital because I don't think it's going to be pretty. And I mean, you're just waking up and you're hearing all these words and you're hearing that you're being prepared for him not to survive the next little while or the ride to the hospital, which is probably within, I'm a very bad judge of distance, but probably within 15 miles from the hospital. And he thinks that I'm going to need his tools, that, all the coaching and the life experience that he has coached me on, I was going to need. The world was spinning, And then when the ambulance pulled in the driveway, he actually walked out and walked to the end of the driveway. The ambulance had backed in. They opened up the door. And he looks at the guy who's standing there. I mean, they hadn't even taken a stretcher out when he went out to the driveway to meet them. He knew he had to get to the hospital. And the guy just looked at him. He had to say, a little help here to walk, to get up in the back of the ambulance. And, I I still can see that whole thing play out, and waking up Brianna and getting her out of the house and dropping her off with my mother, calling my mother at 6:30 in the morning saying, look, I following the ambulance to the hospital, I got to drop Brianna to you so I can be there with him. And just all the one foot in front of the other motions that you do automatically, right? Got to get to the hospital, got to get the kid taken care of, you've got to get, and your mind is racing. So get to the hospital, and the doctor comes out and says, if we don't operate on him within an hour, he's going to die. What do you do? How do you, like, absolutely operate? I mean, I don't know. I don't know what this is. Operate. And within that same hour, he came back out and said he wouldn't operate. That was weird. You're telling me he's going to die, and then you're telling me that you're not going to operate. Hindsight as it is 2020 all the time. And the 2020 tells me, thank God he didn't operate, because I think for the extensive dissection that Tom had, that he wouldn't have survived the surgery. I think it was outside the scope of what this surgeon was capable of doing. And, in 2012, the survival rate was about 2%. And I didn't know that at the time because I didn't know what a dissection was. No one had said that word to me. So I'm very grateful. The Lord works in mysterious ways, always has in my life. And so I believe that for a reason. Now, the next 17 days, Tom will tell you, were absolute awful. And he has a hard time recalling a lot of it because all they did was shoot him up with fentanyl. I would go to see him in the morning, go to work all day, come back and sit with him. My daughter was staying with my mother so that I knew she was taken care of and fed, and, we had decent place to sleep and all that. So I spent my time totally concentrating on him. I would stay at the hospital until they would kick me out at 9:30, 10, come home, catch a few hours, get up and do it again the next day and the next day. So he was in excruciating pain. They kept running tests, they kept doing things. And then finally, the one doctor came to me the one day and said, we've done all we can do. And it was like someone had slapped me. What do you mean you've done all you can do? This is a hospital. You're supposed to heal people. You're supposed to take care of people. I'm trusting you with this. And he told me at that point that Tom's kidneys were shutting down. So I was quite horrified. And meanwhile, my whole family, I've got a very large extended Italian family, and they had reached out and said, why don't we call our other cousin whose husband has a significant position with Long Island Jewish. It's called something else now, but the hospital that they ended up airlifting Tom to was in Bayshore, Long Island. So my commute became a little bit longer, but I remember the night they took him. It was freezing cold. It was probably somewhere middle February. Middle January probably, because he was in the hospital for about 17 days at the first hospital. So I guess it was middle January when they took him. So on a very cold, snowy day, I went up to the helipad with the security people as they wheeled my husband, my life, into a plane, a helicopter, to take him away. And that's really hard because they were taking him 4 hours away from me. I knew my family was down there and would give me some support as far as that goes, but you just watch that helicopter take off. It's pitch black outside, the snow is swirling, and it's freezing out, and it's the middle of January, and he's gone. And they took him out, and I watched him leave with my little earplugs on and the helicopter taking off, and this man, who orchestrated this whole thing, with his putting his arm around my shoulder and telling me it was okay. And I watched him fly away, and I couldn't follow. I couldn't follow. I had started a new job. I was in training. I had so many things, and I had a teenager. So I he called me when he got down there, and he was so emotional. He said the nurse took a warm towel out or blanket, wrapped it around his head, and said, she said, "I've got you. It's okay." And that gave him such peace. For the first time, someone gave him some encouragement. Down at in Bayshore, the doctor there had had some experience with a lot of dissections. So I don't think that it was something that they had really seen up here. For us, thinking that our hospital here is kind of state of the art, well, it's state of the art for rural America, right? And we didn't have any crackerjack kind of I don't know, like you see on all the doctor shows where the guy comes in the white coat and he saves the day and he does this experimental thing that he only saw or he learned or he developed. We didn't have that here. We had no doctor in white shining armor come through the door. So we dealt with having him in Long Island. He was about 4 hours away from me, and I commuted to that every weekend.
And family who stood by us when, all those long days that Tom was in Long Island and I couldn't be there. I had quite a train of my family who would troop in and make sure he was okay and didn't need anything and would sit and visit with him for a while. I used to think when I was a kid that I was related to all of Long Island because my mother's family is so large. But it was a wonderful blessing to know that they were popping in and checking on him and sitting with him for a while when I couldn't be there.
So he went through a lot. He would call me all night long while he was there. And to me, the things he was talking about now have a name. There is I don't recall the exact terminology for it, but it was like he was living a PTSD scenario. And to me, listening to him on the other side of the phone, I'm thinking it's like a Frankenstein laboratory there, that as soon as they turn off everybody goes home, they start the experiments. I mean, the stories he told me, and he always started with grab a pen, grab paper, write this down, write this down. So I have pages and pages and pages of, and being so far away from him, I couldn't save him, and all I wanted to do was go break in the doors and say, "What are you doing to my husband? What's going on here?" And so we finally did, they did do as much as they could. They decided to medically manage him. His dissection started as the B side rather than the A side. So he was significantly compromised, and he was actually continuing to dissect while he was in Long Island at the hospital. We didn't realize it at the time because I spent hours, just hours upon hours, rubbing his back. And I think that he was still dissecting at that point. The hot compresses we came up with, putting like the hand towels in the microwave, getting them real hot, putting them in plastic bags, the plastic bags that you put your clothes in, and just leaving them on his back so that he would get some relief. The pain was really excruciating for him. So hours upon hours, I would just rub his back to try to make him comfortable and plump his pillows and do all that. Some nurses feel it's intrusive to have family members there. To me, I never try to be in the way, just try to be the extra set of hands because I know they're shorthanded and I know they can't be with people every minute of the day. So to me, I always tried to be a help and not in the way. So that was my function. We had a wonderful, wonderful crackerjack nurse there, though. I'll tell you what, I remember him introducing himself to me and telling me, "My name is Jampa. I'm Tampa with a J." And I said, "So see, I will never forget you." Um, so he introduced himself and they promptly kicked me out of Tom's room. And Tom was attached to so many IVs that he couldn't even roll over. They were so tangled. It was such a mess. I I couldn't even believe it. But when Jampa was done with him, The lines were all straight. He had room to roll over. He was the best. He was the knight in shining armor. He was the crackerjack person that was unforgettable. Every now and again, when you're at your lowest point, you meet somebody who can inspire you to think that there's hope. And he was that for me. So anyway, so it was a long process. And our next hurdle came when he finally got released from the hospital. They wanted him to stay through rehab, and he'd been away for a long time at that point, and he said, no, I want to go home. I want to go home. So we took him, but by the time they released us, it was 10 o'clock at night. And the next hurdle was that he'd barely been out of bed. They'd only just started rehabbing him walking. So it was December 23rd until mid-February. That was probably where the mid-February comes in, that he had really not been out of bed. So he could not really walk.
So we got released 10 o'clock at night, the handful of paper prescriptions. They wouldn't even give me pills to get me through the next 24 hours so that I could take care of him. And here you go, sign the papers, sayonara. Get him out to the car. I have no wheelchair. I have no walker. I have no crutches. I have no way to move him around.
Unbelievable. So being 4 hours away from home, I looked for a pharmacy that we had in both places so that I could get prescriptions refilled once we got home. So found one, and again, another angel. And he was just a little intern, in the pharmacy. And he's looking at these prescriptions, and he looks at me and he said, if I fill these the way they're written, these two anyway, it'll kill him. What? So at 10:30 at night, he's calling back to the floor to try to get them to rewrite these prescriptions because Tom's already behind in getting the meds that's keeping him alive. So got that hurdle up. My brother actually still lived in Long Island, or still does live in Long Island at the time, so we were able to stay overnight with him before we started our trek back to home the next day.
So we drove home, and thus began the biggest part of the journey, learning how to live with one another, right? Learning the fragility, learning, can you touch them? Can you, what can they do? How much do you push? How much do you coddle? All those were new for me because Tom is very strong-willed, strong of physicality, and very frustrated with himself at this point. When he was struggling to go to the bathroom, just walking down the hall, I remember him being so angry at feeling defenseless. And the fine line you have to walk between a man and his masculinity and your coddling. It's tough. You don't want to take away his masculinity, but you're fearful. You're fearful for the fall. You're fearful for the bump. You're fearful for any jostling that could, in your mind, jeopardize his life.
So then it becomes the getting used to day to day, and it becomes 40 odd pills a day and filling the pill holder so that you can be timely with what you got to take and how you've got to take it. And it's trying to walk to the bathroom, and it's trying to take care of your personal hygiene needs. And as a man of his generation, you don't admit the weakness. You don't admit that there's help that you need because you're a man and you want to do this all yourself. And I can remember him getting very frustrated and very angry and saying, I am a man. I can do this myself. And, it was a very bitter pill for him to swallow. And of course, as someone who's caregiving and being supportive, you're a wife, you're not a mom, not to him anyway. And, that's a fine line that you walk to not upset his masculinity and his sense of independence, but to give him the help he needs as a helpmate and a partner. So that's kind of a fine line for any caregiver to give to walk that line, because you just by nature want to jump in and make it all better. Whether that's the mom in you, whether that's just you don't want to see him suffering. He's the love of your life. He's the father of your child. He's all those things. And to see him so incapacitated is as tough for him to be in that position as it is for you to watch, because I deferred everything to him. He was the head of the household. He was the one who, made a lot of the decisions. Not that I didn't partake in those decisions or whatever, but, I relied on him. And to see him in this situation, to be vulnerable, was a really tough thing for me. And to make sure that I didn't make him feel less either. It was hard enough for him on his own, with his own expectations of himself, to not feel less. My caregiving was inspired by my mother. My dad had broken his neck just before my 12th birthday, and I watched her. He was paralyzed from the neck down. So I watched her caregive him, everything. But she deferred all things children related still to him. She never let him feel that he wasn't still the head of the household, or the disciplinarian, or that you didn't have to make amends for your report card. All of that were still with him. So in that, the normal routine of the household was not disrupted, even though there was a disruption in life as we knew it. She did her best to not have it impact the children on a day-to-day. So that was where my inspiration came from, and why I was not maybe floundering like someone else who is new into a caregiving situation. So for me, I had that blessing. But there were still challenges. My father was paralyzed from the neck down. Tom was not. Tom could still do things for himself. So I didn't have quite the 100% caregiving that my mother did. However, the emotional and the way that you conduct day to day, and talking to him, that's another big deal when you're a caregiver, is not to be mother-like, and not to and to carry a dialogue. So there is a back and forth, and there's a conversation like it used to be. And your topics might be a little bit different, but not all of them. You still have the day-to-day things to talk about. There's still groceries, there's still bills, there's meal planning, there's kid stuff. All of those things still remain the same, regardless whether you are paralyzed or not. But going forward, it was a new way of life, and it was Thomas who took hold of looking at all these pills. Now, for us, we've never been very big on pill taking in general. It's, it might be a headache here or there, backache, whatever. But we've been generally very healthy people, thankfully. And so having this myriad of pills to sort through each and every day, and to plan this week worth of pills, I mean, it was literally an hour of a Sunday night plunking pills into the little holders, and making sure that, and I had a piece of paper telling me how many of each went into into each of these pockets, and got the whole week prepared. So I did that for probably 3 or 4 months before he took that over and said, look, I want to see what this is all about. I want to take care of this, which scared me, because I really wanted to make sure he had everything he needed, but I surrendered it to him. And from that, he began to start exploring for us, and not for everybody, because everyone's health situation is different, and how your doctor sees things is different. But he began to explore what all these pills were for, and what they were helping him or maybe not helping him with. Because you see, we also had a very difficult time finding a general practitioner once we came back from Long Island who would accept him. a lot of doctors really are, and rightly so, with malpractice and so on, what it is, and I get it. But they don't want someone so terribly compromised in their care. So we did find a young doctor. She was actually an osteopath, so she was quite a bit more open to homeopathic things, which is a direction we really wanted to pursue. So we did a lot of research, and Tom did a lot of conversations with her, and she still is a blessing to us because she still is caring for our whole family. Um, but she took it on and she did research right along with him, and together they came up with a plan of meds, which got rid of more than half of what he was taking. And I think a lot of what he was taking was out of an extra amount of caution, trying to keep him alive till they could figure out what was going on. So, not saying all pills are bad. I'm just saying that for us, we wanted to explore another way. Tom doesn't particularly care for oxy. He was on fentanyl. Fentanyl is great taken under the right circumstances, because I know many families have been devastated by fentanyl and what its potential is. But fentanyl is a very quick release, quick get you out of pain. It doesn't last very long. And yet when you're in the hospital and they monitor it so strongly, it was very hard for him to have continued pain relief. So I did some exploration into essential oils. And that's probably been something I've been doing for about the last maybe 4 or 5 years now, is exploring the uses of these things. Maybe you've seen on a lot of the programs or advertisements about the many uses of Vicks and Vicks Vapor Rub on your feet if you're coughing or you've got a cold, like these old wives' tales really work, So I'd slather up his feet, and put his socks back on. And, we were trying to find a way that he could find some pain relief. We were never going to take it all away, but make it tolerable. And so we've experimented a lot with essential oils, and he gets quite a bit of relief, and he rotates through them. I will manufacture for him probably 3 or 4 at a time, using a slightly different formulation for each. Because the one thing with using homeopathics is that, unlike chemicals, it doesn't stay with you. You'll build up a tolerance to it. So he would use the one formulation for 2 or 3 weeks and then move on to the next formulation. And I always write down what I mix so I can repeat the success or doctor the not success. And so that's something we've found a lot of good in. So moving forward, we've been doing a lot. We found another, quite by accident, white coat in shining armor in the form of a vascular surgeon in Albany who agreed to work with us. He was so funny. Yeah, he was a marvel, a miracle in our lives. And he sat down there. He's a very dapper man in his suit and his shaved head and his black glasses. And he drew his picture like they all do on the legal pad, when it looks like a kindergartner drew what that aorta looks like. And he said, "Look, this is what you got. And I've got a plan. It's not a very good plan, but it's a plan." And we were so many years into this, and Tom's quality of life was really beginning to diminish in his mobility and his ability to even have stamina. He could tell you where every sitting bench was throughout Walmart. He knew he could make it to each one. And then they started taking those benches out, so he was like really screwed. So he said, let's start with this. So gradually over the next, I think it was about 3 years, he stented Tom from stem to stern. He started with the biggest leaks and then worked his way around. Tom had done powerlifting back in the day. And that did something to his veins, especially in his legs. So we wanted to try to increase blood flow to his lower extremities because he was dealing with a lot of neuropathy in his feet and legs. And so we figured if we could get more blood flow, that would help with the nerve damage. So the first thing that we did in order to start increasing blood flow to the lower extremities was to work with the kidneys, because he had been just about in renal failure. So his kidneys were just coming back. So Dr. Maida had put these stents into the kidneys, which it was funny that he ended up with gout, which in and of itself was not funny. But all I envisioned was the little mouse from the storybooks as a child, the little mouse in the hole, the sweeping out the dust in the corners with her little kerchief on. And I envisioned this blood just sweeping through his kidneys and getting out the cobwebs, and just gave him this gout because all this uric acid that had been there was just being swept away by this. And so fortunately that was short-lived, and that was the only bout of that he had had. But I just envisioned a little mousey in there just sweeping out all that stuff. So, but when he went to try to stent the legs, Tom's veins from all those years of powerlifting were too big for the stents, believe it or not. And he said, I can't stent that because if it moves, it will go up to his heart and kill him. So he can't. We tried twice, and it was quite painful for Tom, the recovery. But fortunately, with all this stenting that has been done, he's never been cut open. So we've never had to have that kind of recovery time that others have had. I have appreciated, there have been a couple of people who have helped me along the way. I found a couple of people who did survive aortic dissections, and I found them on Facebook quite by accident. And I have a rapport with both of these gentlemen. And in my worst moments, they were certainly an inspiration to me, both having been on death's door, you know. So when I was feeling at my lowest and by myself, I was able to chat with them, and they helped me. But day to day, we are very blessed that it's been 12 years. I am constantly amazed by the strides that have been made in how we take care of these aortic dissections, and the survival rate has astronomically improved, because there's an awareness now. Anyone can improve themselves after they're made aware, right? So that now it's, when you walk into the hospital with chest pain, they have hopefully been made aware enough that they don't automatically think it's a heart attack. You know, we can only guess how many people didn't survive just based on that fact alone when they were admitted to the hospital, because they were so conditioned that any kind of chest pain was a heart attack, and start those protocols right away. So we don't know the true statistics of what that was, and we never will. But I'm so glad for the awareness, and I'm so glad for groups like this. And I think that I would hope to share and continue to share with anyone who questions what my journey is, and has been and will continue to be, will not be anyone else's. In that we're all individual, and we're individual in our relationships with our spouses, our loved ones who've had the dissection. Our lifestyles are all different, but I feel such joy every time I hear of someone really resuming their life, that they're running and they're hiking and they're doing these things. No, that's not going to be in our cards. Our situation is different. But each time that there is an advancement, and you can see a return to some sort of normalcy, I find I'm just so uplifted to hear that, because I find that it seems there's a lot of people suffering from this, and it's not just an midlife and elderly person's thing. There are teenagers for whatever reason, whether it's genetic or whether it's a sudden impact injury, because those too, you can't rule those out. Those happen, car accidents and the like. Um, so for a myriad of reasons, there's a lot of a tipping of the scales, if you will, where not only are you surviving, but you're serving a broader range of people. And women, men, children, teenagers, it doesn't matter. What does matter is the support that each one of us can find medically, emotionally, and just being part of a group where you can say, hey, try this. It worked for us. Or this didn't work for us, but it might work for you, but it is something we tried. So a sharing of knowledge is always the best way to learn, right? And the experience that we've all had. So I'm very grateful that we've kind of, rather than scattered a group here, a group there, we're kind of pulling together in one central area so that we can formulate a place, like a library, right? It's a place where you can go to gain knowledge, and rather than this small place here and this small place there, which each one of us were individual silos, right? So we brought these silos together to a common area where we can share and, hopefully inspire, if nothing else, but also give people hope. And there's always hope. There's always hope. Always. Thank you for listening.